Olivia Carter stared at the nearly empty can of formula sitting beside the sink. The metal bottom reflected the weak yellow light above her stove, exposing every scrape inside the container. Nothing left. Not enough for another bottle. Behind her, Lily whimpered from the portable crib pushed beside the couch. The apartment was cold again. The radiator along the wall clicked and groaned, but barely produced heat, and Olivia had stopped calling the landlord 2 weeks ago because every conversation ended the same way. I'll send someone when I can. No one ever came. She rubbed her eyes hard enough to hurt. 3 hours of sleep. Maybe less. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 11:42 p.m. because the power had flickered again earlier that evening. Olivia opened her banking app for the 4th time in 10 minutes, even though she already knew the number. $12.08. Rent overdue. Electric bill overdue. Her former employer still hadn't processed the final unemployment paperwork after the daycare absences that had cost her the job. And Lily needed formula tonight. Not tomorrow. Not when things got better. Tonight. Lily's cry sharpened. Olivia crossed the apartment quickly, lifting her daughter against her chest. I know, she whispered, rocking gently. I know, baby. The baby's forehead rested beneath Olivia's chin, warm and damp from restless sleep. For one terrible moment, Olivia considered watering down the last bottle again. The pediatrician had warned her not to, but hunger made desperate people negotiate with rules. She swallowed hard and reached for her phone. James, her younger brother, the only family member still answering her calls after the divorce. Her fingers trembled while typing. I hate asking again, but could you send me $40 for Lily's formula? I get paid Friday. I swear I'll pay you back. She stared at the message. Humiliation sat like acid in her throat. At 29 years old, she used to manage vendor accounts for one of Boston's largest logistics firms. Now she was counting coins in laundromats and begging for baby formula. Lily fussed again. Olivia hit send before pride could stop her. Then she leaned her forehead against the wall and closed her eyes. A few seconds later, her phone buzzed. That was fast. She opened the message. I think you have the wrong number. I'm not James. Olivia froze. Then heat flooded her face. She checked the contact. One wrong digit. Of course. Even begging for help. She couldn't do it correctly. I'm so sorry, she typed quickly. Please ignore this. She tossed the phone onto the couch, mortified. But 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. Is your baby okay? Olivia stared. Most people ignored strangers. Most people certainly didn't continue conversations involving desperate midnight requests for money. Her first instinct was caution. Single mothers learned caution quickly, especially after men like David. She adjusted Lily higher against her shoulder. We'll manage. Sorry again. 3 dots appeared immediately. What formula does she need? Olivia frowned. Why would a stranger ask that? She almost ignored it. Almost. But Lily gave another tired cry, and exhaustion weakened the walls Olivia normally kept airtight. Enfamil gentlis. She has stomach issues. Another pause. Then, I'd like to help. Olivia laughed bitterly under her breath. There's always something attached. A request. A favor. A price. No thank you, she typed. The response came slower this time. I understand why you'd say no. That annoyed her more than if he'd argued. Because it sounded calm. Measured. Adult. Not manipulative. She sank onto the couch with Lily curled against her chest. Who are you? Alexander. No last name. No explanation. Just Alexander. Across the city, Alexander Reed loosened his tie and stared through the glass walls of his office. The financial district glowed below him. Boston looked clean from 43 floors up. Ordered. Predictable. Nothing like the reality he'd spent years pretending not to see. The merger documents sat open across his desk. 300 employees would lose their jobs once Meridian Technologies absorbed the smaller logistics company. Necessary restructuring. That was the phrase his board preferred. Necessary. He rubbed a hand across his jaw, then looked back at the conversation. A mother begging for formula. He shouldn't still be thinking about it. But something about the exhaustion in her messages unsettled him. Not drama. Not manipulation. Just fatigue. The kind that settled into bones. He knew that kind of exhaustion. His younger sister had worn it before she died. 2 jobs. Medical bills. A baby she couldn't afford. Alexander blinked hard. 10 years later, and grief still arrived without warning. His phone buzzed again. You don't know me. Olivia's message. Exactly, he replied. Sometimes strangers help because they can. Silence. Then finally, I can pay you back Friday. Alexander looked at the message for a long moment. Something tightened painfully in his chest. Even desperate, she needed dignity. What's your payment app? Another long pause. Then she sent it. Alexander transferred $400 before he could overthink it. A second later, her reply came. That's too much. Buy groceries too, he typed. For several moments, nothing came back. Then, thank you. Simple. Raw. He stared at those two words longer than he should have. And for reasons he didn't entirely understand, he asked, how old is Lily? Olivia's fingers stopped. Her stomach tightened. She had never mentioned Lily's name. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. More dangerous. How do you know her name? Alexander frowned, then realized. She had signed the payment account with the name Olivia Carter, Lily's mom. He explained quickly. The silence afterward stretched longer. Too long. Finally, right. Sorry. I'm tired. That answer affected him more than panic would have. Because exhaustion had made her forget what information she'd already shared. That wasn't ordinary stress. That was survival fatigue. Alexander glanced toward the merger file again. The company being acquired flashed across the cover. Halston Logistics. He paused. Something about the name Carter stirred faint recognition. He opened another file. Employee termination reports. Dozens. Then one stopped him. Olivia Carter. Accounts coordinator. Terminated after repeated attendance violations following acquisition restructuring. Alexander stared. A daycare issue had been noted repeatedly. His chest went cold. His company had cut staffing. The restructuring increased workloads. Flexible scheduling. Disappeared. Employees with children suffered first. He leaned back slowly. The woman begging for formula because she'd lost her job might have lost it because of decisions approved by him. The realization sat heavy and ugly in his stomach. For the first time in months, the merger documents looked less like strategy and more like collateral damage. Olivia woke at 6 to the sound of drilling somewhere in the building. Lily had finally slept around 4, which meant Olivia moved through the morning in a fog. She boiled water for bottles while staring blankly at the stack of unopened envelopes beside the microwave. Final notice. Utility warning. Medical bill. Collection agency. She ignored all of them. People drowning didn't sort paperwork. Her phone buzzed. Alexander. Hope she slept okay. The message felt strangely careful. Not intrusive. Not flirtatious. Just considerate. Olivia shouldn't have replied. Instead, she sent a picture of Lily asleep against her shoulder. Only after pressing send did she realize how intimate that felt. A stranger now had a glimpse inside her apartment. Inside her life. Cute kid, he responded. She almost smiled. Almost. Then another message appeared. You worked for Halston Logistics? Her body stiffened. How do you know that? Long pause. I know someone in HR. The answer felt incomplete. Careful. Too careful. Olivia sat down slowly. Why? Another pause. Because I think my company may have hurt you. Her stomach tightened instantly. What company? Meridian Technologies. Olivia stared at the screen. The name hit like a slap. Meridian. The corporation that acquired Halston. The company responsible for the layoffs. The company executives who promised flexibility during transition meetings while quietly cutting positions behind closed doors. The company whose automated email terminated her employment after she missed work to pick Lily up from daycare with a fever. Her fingers shook. You work for Meridian? Yes. What exactly do you do there? Alexander exhaled slowly before typing. I'm the CEO. Olivia laughed once. Sharp. Disbelieving. Of course. Because apparently humiliation wasn't finished with her yet. First she begged a stranger for formula. Now that stranger turned out to be the billionaire responsible for destroying her stability. She typed furiously. You fired people by email while talking about family culture. Alexander read the message without defensiveness. Because she wasn't wrong. He typed back carefully. I didn't personally fire you. That's supposed to make it better? No. Silence. Then another message from Olivia. Do you know what daycare costs in Boston? Do you know what happens when your kid gets sick 3 times in 1 month? Do you know what it feels like begging your landlord for 1 more week? Alexander stared at the screen. No, not directly. But he knew guilt. And lately guilt had become difficult to escape. You're right to be angry, he replied. She didn't answer. Hours passed. Alexander attended meetings he barely absorbed. Board members discussed projections. Expansion. Quarterly forecasts. Meanwhile, he kept remembering a cold apartment and a mother apologizing for asking $40. At noon, he left a meeting early. His assistant looked startled. Sir? The investors, reschedule them. That almost never happened. Alexander grabbed his coat. An hour later, he stood outside a small grocery store in Dorchester. Because he'd done something reckless. He'd used company records to pull Olivia's address. He told himself he only wanted to apologize properly. But even he didn't entirely believe that. Inside the store, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A toddler cried somewhere near produce. A cashier argued with a man over expired coupons. Ordinary life. The kind Alexander rarely saw anymore. Then he spotted her. Olivia stood in the baby aisle comparing prices with visible concentration. Not browsing. Calculating. Every item required math. Lily rested against her chest in a faded carrier, chewing sleepily on her fist. Olivia looked thinner than he expected. Her coat sleeves were frayed. Dark circles hollowed beneath her eyes. But she stood straight anyway, like someone refusing to collapse publicly. Alexander approached slowly. Olivia. She turned sharply. Recognition flashed. Then anger. You tracked me down? Several nearby shoppers glanced over. Alexander kept his voice low. I know this looks bad. It looks insane. Fair. He nodded once. You're right. That answer caught her off guard. Most powerful men argued. Defended themselves. He simply accepted it. Olivia adjusted Lily protectively. Why are you here? Alexander glanced toward the formula shelf. Because I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. She let out a tired laugh. Congratulations. Most people stop thinking about poor women pretty quickly. That landed harder than she intended. Because it was true. He deserved it. Alexander looked around the store. An elderly cashier rubbed her lower back while scanning groceries. A teenager stocked shelves wearing earbuds beneath a store cap. The entire place smelled faintly of burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. How long had it been since he existed inside spaces like this without security, assistance, or reservations? You lost your job because of the restructuring, he said quietly. I lost my job because nobody cared whether working mothers could survive your restructuring. Olivia picked up 2 cans of formula, then checked prices, then put one back. Alexander noticed automatically. Take both. She looked at him sharply. That's not the point. I know, but maybe he didn't. Not fully. That uncertainty unsettled him. They moved silently toward checkout. Lily began fussing halfway there. Olivia bounced her gently while digging through her bag for a pacifier. The exhaustion in her movements looked practiced. Automatic. She lived like this every day. At the register, Olivia opened her banking app again, then froze. What? Alexander asked. She swallowed. The transfer hasn't cleared yet. The cashier waited awkwardly. People behind them shifted impatiently. Heat crept into Olivia's face. Not again. Not another public moment. I can put some things back, she whispered. Alexander handed over his card immediately. No. Olivia's jaw tightened. I said I'd handle it. And I'm trying to help fix something I helped cause. The cashier looked between them carefully, like she was trying to determine whether this was generosity or control. Honestly, Olivia wondered the same thing. Outside, cold wind hit them immediately. Alexander carried the heavier bag while Olivia pushed the stroller. For several blocks, neither spoke. Then finally Olivia said quietly, My ex used to help like this after fights. Alexander slowed. What do you mean? He'd scream at me. Break things. Then buy groceries the next day like kindness erased it. Alexander's grip tightened around the bag. Did he hurt you? Olivia laughed humorlessly. Everyone asks that like bruises are the only thing that counts. He looked at her. She kept her eyes forward. He made me feel expensive, she said softly. Like every problem I caused cost too much. That sentence stayed with Alexander long after they reached her apartment building. The hallway smelled faintly of cigarettes and boiled cabbage. A toddler cried somewhere upstairs. Olivia unlocked apartment 3B. The door stuck halfway because swollen wood warped in winter. Alexander noticed everything immediately. The patched couch. The second-hand crib. The stack of unopened mail. The carefully cleaned counters trying to compensate for everything else. Nothing here was careless. Just stretched thin. Olivia noticed him noticing. You don't have to look guilty about it. He met her eyes. I do, actually. That answer unsettled her. Because she expected arrogance. Not honesty. Lily began crying harder. Olivia moved automatically toward the kitchen. She's teething and constipated at the same time, which honestly feels cruel. Alexander surprised himself by laughing softly. The sound startled both of them. Olivia mixed formula while balancing Lily on one hip. Halfway through, exhaustion visibly hit. She closed her eyes briefly. Just 1 second. But her hand shook. Alexander stepped closer. Sit down. I'm fine. You almost dropped the bottle. That irritated her because it was true. Reluctantly, Olivia sat. Alexander finished warming the bottle awkwardly. Clearly unfamiliar. You've never done this before, she muttered. No. He handed the bottle over carefully. Lily quieted almost immediately once feeding began. The apartment finally settled into silence. Alexander looked at the baby. Then at Olivia. How long have you been alone? She kept her attention on Lily. Since. I was 7 months pregnant. Your husband left? He said fatherhood ruined his life before it even started. Alexander looked away. Something dark moved through his expression. Because his own father had once said something similar. Men carry damage forward in ugly ways. Sometimes quietly, sometimes violently. Olivia noticed his silence. You have kids? No. The answer came too quickly. There had almost been one. Years ago. Before the accident. Before the hospital room. Before he buried himself in work because grief felt easier when translated into spreadsheets and acquisitions. Olivia studied him. For the first time, the billionaire image cracked slightly. Something tired lived underneath it. You look exhausted too, she said quietly. Alexander smiled faintly. Different reasons. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into an uneasy rhythm. Text messages first, then occasional visits. Never romantic. Not yet. Too much damage existed for that. Alexander helped Olivia revise her resume. Olivia accused him of speaking like a corporate robot. He accused her of underselling herself. Some conversations ended warmly. Others ended with frustration. Especially whenever Meridian came up. One rainy afternoon, Alexander arrived carrying takeout containers and found Olivia crying quietly at the kitchen table. Bills surrounded her. An eviction notice sat open beside a pediatric invoice. She wiped her face immediately. Embarrassed. I'm handling it. Alexander set the food down carefully. Okay. He didn't push. That mattered. Most people rushed to fix visible pain because it made them uncomfortable. Alexander simply sat beside her. After several minutes, Olivia whispered, I used to be smart. He frowned. You are smart. No. I mean functional. Organized. Responsible. She laughed shakily. Now I forget pediatric appointments and cry in grocery stores because diapers went up $3. Alexander looked at the overdue notices. Then at the woman beside him, trying desperately not to fall apart in front of him. You're surviving, he said quietly. That's not the same thing. No, it wasn't. He understood that too well. That night, after Lily finally fell asleep, Olivia admitted something she hadn't told anyone. I almost stayed with David because I couldn't afford not to. Alexander looked at her sharply. She stared at the table. Everyone says leave abusive men like it's simple math. But rent exists. Childcare exists. Insurance exists. Her voice cracked. Fear changes what people tolerate. Alexander felt something twist painfully inside him. Because companies like his profited from exactly that desperation. Workers too afraid to lose healthcare. Too exhausted to resist. He suddenly understood why this connection unsettled him so deeply. Olivia wasn't just one struggling woman. She represented consequences he'd spent years distancing himself from. And now she sat 3 feet away feeding her daughter while unpaid bills piled across the table. Human. Visible. Impossible to reduce into quarterly reports. 3 days later, everything collapsed. Lily developed a fever. By midnight, she struggled to breathe. Olivia panicked immediately. Hospitals terrified her. David's mother had died after doctors ignored her symptoms for hours in an overcrowded ER. Since then, medical buildings triggered something sharp and irrational inside Olivia's chest. But Lily's breathing worsened. Her tiny body burned hot. Olivia's hands shook so badly, she dropped her phone twice before calling Alexander. He answered instantly. What happened? I think something's wrong with her. The fear in Olivia's voice erased every remaining layer of corporate composure inside him. I'm coming. 20 minutes later, they sat beneath fluorescent hospital lights while Lily cried weakly in Olivia's arms. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. A television mounted in the corner played muted news no one watched. Children coughed. Someone argued with reception about insurance coverage. Real suffering. Unfiltered. Alexander watched Olivia fill out paperwork while bouncing Lily against her shoulder. Halfway through, she stopped. I forgot her insurance card. Panic flooded her expression. Olivia, he said gently. Breathe. If they bill me again, I can't. I'll handle it. She looked up sharply. I don't want charity. This isn't charity. His voice stayed calm. Your daughter needs care. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Not because of the money. Because she was tired of choosing between dignity and survival. Hours later, a doctor finally explained it was a severe respiratory infection. Treatable, but frightening. Lily needed monitoring overnight. Relief hit Olivia so hard her knees nearly buckled. Alexander caught her arm automatically. She didn't pull away. Not this time. At 4 a.m, Olivia sat beside Lily's hospital crib while rain streaked the windows. Alexander returned carrying vending machine coffee. Terrible coffee, but warm. Olivia accepted it quietly. You don't have to stay, she whispered. He looked at the sleeping baby, then at her. I know, but he stayed anyway. And somewhere between exhausted silence and fluorescent hospital light, something shifted between them. Not romance. Not yet. Trust. Fragile. Uneven. Real. The article appeared 2 weeks later. Meridian CEO spotted leaving hospital with mystery woman and baby. Olivia discovered it while waiting at a laundromat. The comments were worse. Gold digger. Another struggling single mother trapping a billionaire. Typical. She felt sick. By evening, paparazzi stood outside her building. One photographer shouted, Did you meet him through an arrangement site? Olivia froze. Humiliation flooded hot beneath her skin. Alexander arrived moments later and immediately stepped between her and the cameras. Back away. His voice turned cold enough to silence everyone. But the damage was done. Upstairs, Olivia finally exploded. This is why rich men are dangerous, she snapped. Your world destroys people and keeps moving. Alexander absorbed the anger quietly. Because part of him agreed. I didn't call them. Doesn't matter. Her breathing shook. You get scandals. I get consequences. That sentence hit with brutal accuracy. He looked around the apartment. The leaking window. The unpaid notices. The tiny crib. You're right, he said softly. Olivia stared. Stop doing that. Doing what? Agreeing with me like it fixes anything. For the first time since meeting her, frustration crossed Alexander's face. What exactly would you like me to do, Olivia? I don't know. Lily startled awake crying. Both of them stopped instantly. The argument dissolved beneath exhaustion. Alexander rubbed a hand across his face, then quietly picked up the diaper bag while Olivia soothed Lily. They moved around each other carefully after that, like two people trying not to damage something fragile. Before leaving, Alexander paused near the door. I'm trying, he admitted quietly. Olivia looked at him, and for the first time, she realized helping her affected him emotionally too. Not performatively, personally. That frightened her more than arrogance would have, because genuine people were harder to keep distance from. A month later, Olivia stood inside Meridian Technologies for the first time since her termination. Not because Alexander insisted, because she demanded answers. The Childcare Policy Review Board meeting felt painfully corporate. Executives discussed employee retention concerns while sipping expensive coffee. Olivia nearly walked out. Then one executive said, Unfortunately, some employees simply lack work-life discipline. Silence filled the room. Alexander's expression hardened instantly. But Olivia spoke first. My daughter had a fever of 104 degrees, she said quietly. Every head turned. The daycare called 3 times. I left because she was sick. Her voice stayed steady despite shaking hands. If that's poor discipline, then your company doesn't deserve parents working for it. No one answered. Because truth sounded ugly in boardrooms. Afterward, in the hallway, Olivia leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Alexander approached carefully. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. She looked at him directly. You know what the worst part of poverty is? He waited. People stop seeing your decisions as human. Everything becomes a character flaw instead of survival. Alexander felt that sentence settle somewhere permanent inside him. Later that week, Meridian announced expanded childcare flexibility and emergency caregiver assistance. The board hated the cost. Alexander approved it anyway. Not because Olivia saved him, Because she forced him to confront realities he spent years insulated from. There was a difference, and both of them understood it. Winter arrived hard that year. Snow piled along sidewalks. Heating costs rose. Life remained difficult. Olivia still worked temporary accounting contracts. Still worried constantly. Still checked prices before buying cereal. Alexander still worked impossible hours. Still carried grief quietly. Still woke some nights remembering his sister dying alone because she delayed treatment she couldn't afford. Neither magically healed the other. That wasn't how damaged people worked. But slowly, carefully, they became part of each other's lives. Alexander learned how to calm Lily during teething episodes. Olivia learned Alexander hated silence during thunderstorms because the night his sister died, rain hammered hospital windows exactly the same way. Some evenings they argued. About class. About guilt. About power. About whether people like Alexander could truly understand people like Olivia. Sometimes the answer felt like no. Sometimes she saw him sitting cross-legged on her apartment floor building stacking towers for Lily while wearing a $5,000 coat, and life felt stranger than resentment alone could explain. One snowy evening, after Lily finally fell asleep, Olivia stood beside the kitchen window, watching traffic crawl through slush below. "You know what scares me?" she asked quietly. Alexander looked up from the couch. "What?" "Depending on someone again." He didn't answer immediately. Then, "Me too." She turned slightly. "You?" Alexander gave a tired smile. "When you have enough money, people confuse access with affection." He looked down briefly. "You stop knowing who would stay if the power disappeared." Olivia studied him. For months, she'd viewed him mostly as a symbol. CEO, privilege, the system, and he was those things. But he was also a grieving brother, a lonely man, someone trying imperfectly to become better than the world that shaped him. That complexity softened something inside her. Not completely, but enough. She crossed the room slowly, then sat beside him, not in his lap, not dramatically, just close enough that their shoulders touched lightly. Warmth spread quietly between them. Human. Earned. Outside, snow continued falling across Boston. Inside the small apartment, unpaid bills still sat beneath a magnet on the refrigerator. Lily would probably wake again before dawn. Alexander still had board meetings tomorrow. Nothing about life had transformed magically. But for the first time in a very long time, neither of them felt entirely alone. And sometimes, for wounded people, that was where healing actually began.